13, 14 for ID. Determine those came from the car.
Yes, sir.
Judge, I believe you would, without objection, want to remove these into evidence. That's correct, Your Honor.
It's 13, 14?
Yes, sir. You want this to be- Yes, ma'am. Same thing for 16 through 42, Mark. The defense for ID you reviewed, these are items that you pulled out of the car also.
I have.
Judge, we removed these into evidence, I believe, without objection.
Correct. These basically were kind of compartmentalized, most of, everything that came out of the truck, SUV,
Yes, sir.
in the respective envelopes as to perhaps categories.
Same thing for defense 44 through 48, these all came out of the car. You reviewed these things that you collected.
Yes, sir, they are.
Judge, we would move defense 44 for ID through 48 into evidence.
44
44
through 48.
All right, Ron Grady did 44. Ron Grady did, through 42.
Did you just go through 42 and missing 43?
Yep, that's what I was saying, then we need to have a 43.
So 43 is the only number of that sequence from 13 to 15.
I'm trying to keep them in sequence.
16 through 48, with the exception of 43.
I'll show you defense for ID 49 through 51. These are Bibles that you collected out of the vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Judge, we would move defense 49 through 51 into evidence.
Objection?
Objection, Your Honor.
Objection.
And Ms. Jones, defense 49 appears to be a Bible.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
With that symbol there, what that is of.
If I'm not mistaken, is that a Gideon Bible?
Is it Masonic?
Is it Masonic? I'm not familiar with it. My apologies.
On the front of it, it looks like it comes from a Sinclair Lodge. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
This is defense 50. Appears to be a Bible to Nahtahn Jones. Is that correct?
That's correct.
On defense 51. Appears to be another Bible. Merah Jones.
Correct.
And these are Bibles that you collected out of the vehicle.
Yes, sir, they are.
Show you defense for ID 73 and 74. Those are items you collected out in the vehicle also.
Yes, sir.
Judge, we would move defense 73 and 74 into evidence, I believe, without objection.
No objection, 73 and 74, and there also additional, or a scrapbook and another Bible, is that right?
Ms. Jones, defense 73 appears to be a baby book. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's a book that on the front it says "A baby is a treasure."
And does it indicates on there the name of the baby? It says we named the baby. You see that?
Oh, is it Timothy Ray Jones?
Yes, ma'am. Defense 74 appears to be another Bible.
Correct.
And you also collected defense for ID 53 and 54, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I did.
But we would move these items into evidence also.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Those numbers are 52, 53, and 54 admitted without objection.
I'll show you what's been marked for ID defense 60, 61.
Yes, sir. They are.
Judge, we would move defense 60, 61, and 62 into evidence.
60, 61, and 62? No objection.
This appears to be a constitution and code for the Grand Lodge of AFM, 275th anniversary, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Defense 62 appears to be another Bible.
Yes, sir.
Looks like this one is to Eli Jones, is that correct?
Yes, sir. It is.
You have reviewed everything on this table here.
That's correct. I have.
This is defense for ID 63, Judge. We would move everything on the table into one as defense 63.
No objection, Your Honor.
So, tabletop will be put in box number 63 and admitted without objection altogether for convenience of the courthouse.
Yes, sir. And I'm going to show you defense 64 through 72. All of these items are collected by you also.
Yes, sir.
Then we would move defendants 64 through 72 into evidence. I believe this without objection.
Correct, Your Honor.
Or without objection.
Defendant 64. Appears to be military discharge paperwork.
That's correct.
Defendant 66 appears to be a South Carolina
It's a pamphlet labeled South Carolina Department of Social Services.
and in defendant 72 appears to be a variety of school pictures.
That's correct. They're in packages, pictures taken at school.
How to get them in focus. Okay, this doesn't. And these school photos were photos that you pulled out
Yes,
of
sir.
the Cadillac Escalade.
Yes, sir, they are. I believe defense for ID 75 was a diploma that you from Mississippi State. Yes, sir, that's
Good.
correct.
We would move defendant 75 into evidence.
Any objection to the diploma?
No, Your Honor.
And 78 was some medicine
Yes,
you
sir,
had retrieved also.
that's correct.
That we would move defendant 78 into evidence.
No objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
And Ms. Jones, when you were understanding, when you got there and started, I think you said at 8:30 on the 7th, so that car had been there about 12 hours?
I received a call about the vehicle at 8 minutes after 9 the night before.
So a little bit under, well, yeah, a little bit under 12 hours.
Yes.
correct? And when you got there, the windows were down.
At my instructions, yes.
And so apparently been down almost 12 hours.
Yes,
And the smell was still, as such, you said it was burn your nostrils?
absolutely.
Fair to say the worst thing you've ever smelled? Or the strongest?
It was strong.
That's all the questions I have.
Mr. President, thank you, Your Honor. Jones, let me show you Defendant's Exhibit 54.
Yes, sir.
That was an item that you said that came out of the car.
Yes, sir.
Would you cut that open and publish the jury what's inside, please? Show them any of the envelopes that you need to.
These are United States savings bonds. There is an unopened envelope of a savings bond issued to Merah Jones. Would you like me to open it?
Please go ahead.
It is a savings bond in the amount of $50. It was issued June 22nd of 2010. There is also a unopened envelope of a savings bond issued to Nahtahn Jones. In the amount of $50 on the same date, June 22nd, 2010. There is a $50 savings bond to Elias Jones, same date, June 22nd, 2010. There is a $100 savings bond to Elias Jones on January the 7th of 2010. There is a $100 savings bond issued to Elias Jones again on January the 7th of 2010. There's a $100 savings bond to Merah Jones on January the 7th, 2010. Another one to Merah Jones on January the 7th, 2010. A $100 savings bond to Nahtahn Jones, January the 7th, 2010. A $50 savings bond to Nahtahn Jones on April the 10th of 2009, and a $50 savings bond to Nahtahn Jones on April the 10th, 2009.
And all those items were found in Mr. Jones' vehicle when you
That's
processed.
correct, in his possessions, yes.
Defense Exhibit 81, that was one of the photographs that you put in earlier that had a lot of things put out on the table when you began sorting documents. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Let me show you what's been marked. Has not been marked yet. Let me show you State's Exhibit 132 and ask if you recognize that document as being one of the ones in the photo that you took from the car.
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the state would offer 132 in evidence.
No objection.
No objection, 132's in, except the preliminary objection.
Yes, sir.
Are you able to read that, Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Starting in the handwritten, well, start over here. What's the date that's showing up?
When it's a sales flyer for August the 20th to September the 2nd, Wednesday through Tuesday.
Starting with the handwritten notes in the upper left-hand corner. For what you were able to, would you please read that?
It reads I believe that says needs, and it's underlined, and it says cash. And I'm not 100% sure, SPP, I'm not 100% sure about that one. There's number 1, and it says 3,500, and Wednesday, there's a question mark, 401K, and then number 2 has 6,000K written with 3 question marks. Number 3 is written clothes, and the slash papers, I believe that's what that says. And then there's a scribble and 4, I can't make that out, but out beside it, I think it says garbage. It looks like 8 socks. Oh, I think that's 4 pants, 8 socks, underwear, maybe 2 shorts. I'm not sure about that one. 10 shirts. I'm not 100% sure what that says. Electronics, maybe. I'm not sure.
Moving
About
over
that
to the
one.
middle, there's another list.
The second portion of writing is a list again that says camping supplies, says gas and jug. Then the initials that I think it stands for muriatic acid. Says tent, charcoal, steaks, grill. Not 100% sure what that says. And I'm not sure I can make that out from here.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
All right. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Calls Eric Johnson with his hand.
Once you have a seat, state your full name, spelling, and last name. Recognize.
Yes,
My name is Eric Johnson, spelling last name Johnsson.
Mr. Johnson, where are you currently employed?
I am currently the Director of Investigations for the Mississippi Department of Human Services in the state of Mississippi.
Can you describe what that job entails and how long you've been doing it?
I've been with the Mississippi Department of Human Services about 4 months. I am the Director of the State Investigations. We have about 10 to 15 investigators around the state that primarily deals with the Mississippi Department of Human Services day in and day out functions.
Prior to that, what was your job duties? What did you do before? Where did you work?
I'm retired from the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, where I served 7 years as a state trooper, and the latter part of my career of 25 years was spent in the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, which is much like your SLED here. It's a state police agency. I attained the rank of lieutenant or regional supervisor.
Back on September 6th of 2014, did you become involved in the Jones case?
I did, Counselor.
And would you tell the jury how that happened?
On the date in question, I received a phone call that night from Under Sheriff Marty Patterson in Smith County. Smith County was within my geographical region in the state of Mississippi. I had 9 counties, and Smith County was one of those counties. I had 4 other agents that worked with me out of my MBI office, or the Department of Public Safety Trooper office. And Marty Patterson, Under Sheriff Patterson, called me that evening and briefed me on what he had. He had 2 deputies out on a driver's license checkpoint. They had a vehicle on the shoulder. This runs South Carolina plates. The driver is alone. There are 5 children that are unaccounted for. And we would like MBI's assistance and MBI crime scene unit assistance as well.
Based on his request, did you help mobilize the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation resources to support Smith County?
Yes, sir, I did do that.
And did that include having Stacy Jones go down there as a crime scene analyst to process the vehicle?
I did. That night after I spoke to Under Sheriff Patterson, I contacted Miss Jones and informed her of what we had. In turn, she also talked to Under Sheriff Patterson, and we agreed that the vehicle should be taken and secured in an indoor facility to preserve any evidence that may be in the vehicle. And we also requested that a law enforcement officer or a deputy sit on that vehicle and preserve the integrity of anything that may be found in there.
As Ms. Jones, crime scene analyst Jones, was processing the vehicle, did you speak with her throughout that day?
The next day was the 7th. Yes, yes. On the morning of the 7th, I believe, was a Sunday. Stacy had agreed that she would report over there. When she got there, it was some 40 miles from my residence on the weekend, and she called me and she said, "I think you need to come over here and look at this vehicle yourself." So that's when I traveled to Smith County to meet Miss Jones and examine the vehicle myself.
She briefed you on what she was finding in the car?
That's correct, Counselor. She was.
Did you actually go and look at the car yourself?
Immediately.
One of the things that she testified that she found out of the car was State's Exhibit number 91, which is a cell phone. Do you recognize that item?
Your Honor, may I refer to my notes?
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Counselor, based on my documentation that I made, that should be a Galaxy Note 3 cellular telephone, black in color, with the serial number indicative of what is written by Ms. Jones' handwriting on this piece of evidence.
Do you remember receiving an item from her that was sealed up, labeled like that?
I do, Counselor.
And did you go into it or mess with the contents of it or manipulate it in any way?
No, sir, I did not. The only thing that I would have done is I would have confirmed the serial number on this device so we could accurately log what we had. So I would have obtained that prior to Ms. Jones sealing and labeling the piece of evidence.
Once you took that item from her, so we're talking about the phone, State's number 91, what, if anything, did you do with it?
As I recall, that day became very busy, as you can imagine, with us coordinating with South Carolina and trying to ascertain the whereabouts of these children and their well-being. One of my functions and roles that I took on is I prepared search warrants based on the electronics retrieved from the black SUV driven by Mr. Timothy Jones. There was a possibility that there could be a forensic value that could have some sort of clue. I immediately began to draft search warrants and in turn contacted our Jackson Field Office FBI agent that I had a contact for to see if the FBI could immediately start analyzing some of this to see if there was any type of value of evidence that we could pull up, whether it be a GPS internally in the phone that could show where it's been, if there was any other possible evidence that could be beneficial and helpful in locating the children.
Specifically, do you remember who you turned the phone over to?
I do. I turned this particular phone over to Special Agent Cynthia Bobie with the Jackson Field Office FBI.
In addition to taking that phone and other electronics as well, did you also have an opportunity to review some of the receipts that Ms. Jones found in the vehicle?
I did, Counselor.
And did you also have a chance to review the notes or see a photograph of the notes that was on the clipboard?
I did, sir.
And specifically, that's the one that is labeled head to camp. Do you remember the one I'm referring to?
I do. I do.
You're
If I may refer to my notes, I'll be glad to.
Sure, if you would.
Yes, sir. Reading on page 2 of my report that I wrote for this case, at the bottom it says, some documents found on the passenger seat inside the Cadillac. It appears to be handwritten notes on a clipboard that stated, head to campground, melt bodies down, correction, melt bodies, sand to dust or small pieces, day 1. Burn bodies, day 2, sand down bones, day 3. MB initials, and dissolve and discard.
Let me show you states 125.
Yes, sir.
Is that the document that you're referring to?
It is, Counselor.
In addition, you've also looked at a Walmart receipt, is that correct?
I did, sir.
And what, if anything, important did you notice about the Walmart receipt? Why was the Walmart receipt important to you?
As I recall, on that Walmart receipt, there were certain items that I noted that appeared to be of some concern to me. If I had a copy of that, and I may have one in my file, muriatic acid, as I recall off the top of my head, jab saw, maybe. Do you have a copy?
Let me show you states 111
States 111. Thank you, Counselor.
and ask if you recognize that.
I do recognize this Walmart receipt.
And is that the Walmart receipt that you were referring to, that you saw that day?
It is, sir. This one is indicative of the dust mask, the 3M goggles, the jab saw, the saw blades, the multi-saw pack, muriatic acid, 5-gallon pail. This is a photographic copy of the receipt that I saw on the day in question in Smith County, Mississippi.
You had actually been to the vehicle itself and seen the condition of the vehicle, correct?
I had seen the condition of the vehicle after Ms. Jones, our crime scene analyst, had arrived there and looked at it and contacted me. As I stated previously, I immediately went to the Smith County area where the vehicle was at.
Is it fair to say that you and law enforcement had concerns about the welfare of the children, that you did not know if any of them were still alive, or in fact if any of them were actually dead?
That is a correct statement, Counselor. We had great concerns for the welfare of the children, and at that point, we didn't know if the children were dead or alive.
In planning, you were asked to come help, correct?
I'm sorry, Counselor.
Asked by Smith County to come help.
That's correct, sir.
And did you actually get an opportunity to meet with both Under Sheriff Patterson, who was involved with the traffic stop on the 6th, and also at this point, did the sheriff come back?
Yes, sir.
So in the three of you meeting, did you make a decision to reach out to the defendant's father?
We did, Counselor. And it's been almost 5 years, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't remember if I called him, how that got started, but at some point I did talk to Mr. Timothy Jones Sr., who resides in Amory, Mississippi.
And Tim Jones Sr. came down, correct?
He did, along with his wife.
And your all's plan was to include him in when you attempted to interview Mr. Jones on the night of the 7th, is that correct?
Yes.
Besides you four, yourself, Tim Jones Sr., Sheriff Crumpton, and Marty Patterson, were there any other law enforcement agents who were involved in an interview or attempted interview?
No, those were the only persons in the room at the time of the interview.
So can you tell me approximately what time the interview attempted, when did that approximately start?
I can, sir. On Sunday, September the 7th, 2014, we sat down with Timothy Jones Jr. at approximately 18:04 hours, 6:04 p.m. in the afternoon.
Let me show you two documents that have been previously marked and ask if you recognize these documents since they would assist in your explanation of the interview that occurred on September 7th of 2014.
Yes, sir. I'm looking at exhibits 24 and 26, states exhibits?
Those are court's exhibits.
Courts exhibits, okay. Yes, sir. Both of these I am familiar with, sir.
You want the state remove both of these into evidence at this time?
Need to be marked as states 133 and 134.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to call you lieutenant. What's your current title? I'm sorry. The director?
Yes, but it doesn't matter. That has nothing to do
I'm going
with
to call you Lieutenant Johnson. How about that?
That'll be perfect, sir.
Lieutenant Johnson, looking at what is states 133, can you tell the jury what we're looking at?
I can, Counselor. In Smith County in Raleigh, Mississippi, it's an old county seat courthouse. I'm not sure how old it is, but two-story building. And in the upstairs of the courthouse, on either side of this facility, is kind of a conference room, break room. And this was the break room on the second floor of the Smith County Courthouse located in Raleigh, Mississippi. Kind of a out-of-the-way area to sit down and talk. The jail is just a mere feet away from the courthouse there.
States 134 is a diagram of that room that you actually drew, correct?
I did, sir.
It's not the scale, correct?
That is correct, not to scale.
So in general, can you read it from there, or you want to step down?
May I step down, Your Honor? I can't see it that well. Thank you.
I'm going to hand you a laser pointer, and I'm going to let you explain the room to the jury.
The room is approximately 14 by 20 in size, shape and size. And in there is one door in, a table area, a couch along this area, a center conference table in the break room with some chairs around it, sink on this end, and then a couple of windows, like I said, on the second floor.
You can have a seat.
Thank you. Do you need Shelley?
I won't lose it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lieutenant, do you remember how the four of you that I mentioned before and the defendant came together, in what order, or who was where first, or anything like that? How the encounter began or started?
Counselor, are you referring to the actual interview with Mr. Tim Jones Jr. and where we were at in proportion to the room?
Yes.
Okay, we were already in the room. Tim Jones Sr. and his wife and the sheriff and I believe, and Under Sheriff Patterson, we'd all talked about it. And quite frankly, that's not a common tactic that you would take a parent or a friend or someone else or someone in there. But under the circumstances that we were dealing with, we felt that maybe he would be more comfortable. He would at least give us some information that would be beneficial to law enforcement, either in Mississippi or South Carolina or in between, that could give us some sort of a direction of where these children were and how we could attend to their needs and get to them, find them in essence. So we talked to Mr. Jones Sr., and he was more than willing, helpful, concerned grandfather, very much so. And he accompanied us to the room, and I think we were already in the room when Timothy Jones Jr. was brought in to the room.
When the defendant was initially brought into the room, do you remember what happened first?
As I recall, he had a few moments to talk to his father. Naturally, he sees his father there, so he talks to his father some. And after a few moments of, chit-chat and talk, with letting them talk, I began to talk to him. And one of the first things I had to do as a law enforcement officer was advise him of his constitutional rights, his Miranda rights.
Let me show you a document and ask if you recognize this document.
Can we stop there for a break? Is that the way before? Okay. I need a break. I'm asking for this break because I've been in here longer than everybody else. So step in the jury room. Don't talk about the case. I need this break myself. So I knew that was a good break. Point.
Good point, Your Honor.
The original Miranda form that I read to Mr. Jones on the night in question.
And you recognize that by your handwriting and signature?
I do, sir.
Your Honor, the state would move this form into evidence.
That should be 135.
Yes, sir.
About that.
Stated previous objection, Your Honor.
Subject to previous objection.
So, Your Honor, can I have the lieutenant step down with me to go over the Miranda form with the jury?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm going to give you a laser pointer.
Yes.
So in general terms, what is a Miranda form?
A Miranda form is an advice of rights form. Every law enforcement agency in the nation uses it. Basically, it's your constitutional rights as a private citizen, and it protects us as law enforcement and makes sure that we do our job correctly and by the law. It's something you read to them advising them of their constitutional rights, as seen here.
In the upper left-hand corner, there's some handwriting. Whose handwriting is that?
That's my handwriting.
What did you write down?
As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, I entered the suspect, the defendant's name, Mr. Timothy Ray Jones Jr., the address he provided, social security number, date of birth, his educational background, and that would be our Mississippi Bureau of Investigation case number.
The handwriting now to the right underneath.
Do it quick.
Where it says your rights, the place, date, and time.
That's my handwriting as well. We were at the Smith County Sheriff's Department. This is the date and this is the time that I started the advice of rights.
Now, the rights themselves, explain how you advised Mr. Jones of his rights.
In reference to this case, Mr. Jones, I began reading these advice of rights. There's two parts to a rights form. You have the advice of rights and you have the waiver of rights at the bottom. And on our Mississippi Bureau of Investigation form that we use in Mississippi, you sign it just at the bottom. In this particular form, there's no different. I began to read the rights to him. As you can see, before we ask any questions, you must understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. And at some point, as I was advising Mr. Jones of his rights, he took the page from me and said, I can read, and read it very loudly to us in the room. He read the entire form from top to bottom to include the waiver of rights. And then this scribble was what he produced as a signature regarding the advice of rights form. As you can see, I signed it as read by and then witnessed by Sheriff Charlie Crumpton in the time, about 2 minutes to do the form. But Mr. Jones took the form and read it top to bottom to us.
You can have a seat, Lieutenant. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel.
At that time of the advisement of rights, other than him taking the form out of your hand and reading it out loud, what, if anything else, did you notice about his demeanor at that time?
In reference to Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Jr.? We were in a relatively cool room and environment this time of year in South Mississippi, and I'm assuming South Carolina gets pretty warm too in the summer times as well. We had the air turned down pretty cool. He had on a orange jumpsuit, which is policy from the sheriff's department there that someone's booked in. They have the orange jumpsuit, the flip-flops, things of that nature. And his hair wasn't real long, maybe my length, maybe a little longer, but he was sweating profusely to the point that I had never seen just beads of sweat that appeared to be on the end of every hair on his head. Very sweaty.
As you began to read his rights to him, and as he then took the paper and read his rights to him, how do you go about seeing if he waived his rights? How do you know he understood his rights?
Well, in this particular case, and anytime and every time I ever dealt with someone regarding their Miranda rights, I would always emphasize on a few things. And one of the things that I always emphasize with someone to make sure that it's clear that they understand their rights is just above where you read waiver of rights, you'll see if you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you will still have the right to stop answering at any time. You also have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to a lawyer. Always emphasize that to someone, just to make sure they understand it and say, look, if you talk to me, you can still stop at any time. Just kind of to do my job, make sure they understand their rights. And then at the bottom, and in this particular case, he read the form top to bottom, but at some point, I got it back, and I continued to say, okay, let's go over this with me now, and advised him of his rights and the waiver of rights I'm referring to now, and that he was not threatened or pressured or coerced in any way, and that he did not want a lawyer at this time, and he was willing to make a statement, and he understood that.
So, any question that, from your dealings with him as far as the Miranda right, did he understand his rights?
I think he did, Counselor.
And did he waive his rights?
He did.
Did he appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs at the time that you were dealing with him?
I wouldn't say alcohol, but in my experience in law enforcement, I would say that he was probably coming off something.
None of the state would cite Rule 701 as opinion testimony by lay witness. Was his perception to be that?
I think his personal observation can be given subject to the objection. So it'll be allowed.
I think it was under the influence of something, coming off something, I don't know, but he was acting in such a manner that I'd never dealt with before.
Regardless, have you still seen any question that he understood what you've asked and was responsive to your questions?
No, Mr. Jones made it perfectly clear that he was educated and that he could read and understand and comprehend.
Did you or anybody else in the room promise him anything if he would talk with you?
No, we did not.
Did you or anybody else in the room threaten him in any way to get him to speak with you?
We did not.
At any time did he ask for an attorney?
He did not.
At any time did he say, I don't want to talk?
He did not.
Did he ever ask to speak with his father alone?
He did not.
Who was doing the questioning?
As I recall, mostly me, but a lot of the interaction during that period of time regarding this interview with Mr. Jones, a lot of the interaction was between his father and he. And myself and Sheriff Crumpton would interject questions at some points in the conversation, and Under Sheriff Patterson was making some notations of things that could possibly prove to be useful on in the investigation. But myself and Sheriff Crumpton would interject questions, but he and his father were in a dialogue a good bit of the time.
Would you explain to the jury then, after the Miranda form was done, he signed it, he waived his rights? Can you tell the jury about the beginning of the interview and how it happened and go from there?
And like I said, as best I recall, he and his father began to talk, and I would interject, okay, Tim, we know that you have 5 children. That's not a question. We've been on the phone with authorities in South Carolina, and they're not with their mother. And your father, their grandfather, wants to know where they're at. Where are these kids? And I'd never, maybe one other time in my career I can remember someone acting this erratic, but he would be from one extreme to the other, extremely loud and teary and crying, and talking about Cindy put this in my head, and we later learned through listening that Cindy was his mother, who had had some mental issues in the past based on our understanding. The only way you can stop me is put a bullet in my head. Just crazy, sounding talk, like bouncing off the wall here. He would calm down, he would talk just a minute, and then he would yell over here, and just one extreme to the other. Very high, low, up and down emotions.
Specifically referring to your report, what did you document that he said
Let me refer.
on page 3?
Of my report, Counselor.
Yes.
Okay.
Regarding either the interview.
Page number again, sir.
3.
Three.
The bottom.
Referring to my notes, Jones began to speak with his father. Would you mind if I read some of this to
Please do.
convey it to the jury?
Slowly,
Thank you, Your Honor.
benefit.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Just start over, please.
Regarding to the report that I wrote in reference to this interview, Jones Jr. began to speak with his father. Jones Jr. was acting in such a manner that I've never seen. He was sweating profusely in a cold room with beads of sweat dripping from his hair. He would scream out that it was Cindy who put these voices in his head, and that Cindy passed this on to him. We discovered Cindy was Jones Jr.'s mother, who had apparently spent time in a mental institution. Jones continued, "She put this poison on my head." Jones Sr. expressed to his son that he loved him and he would do whatever he had to in order to get Jones Jr. the mental help he needed. Jones Jr. stated, "The only way you can help me is to put a bullet in my head. That is the only way you can stop me. The only way you can fix me is to kill me." Jones Jr. continued, "After Amber left me," and we learned later that was the ex-wife, "it just came out of me. I couldn't control it. Voices are in my head." Jones Sr. asked Jones Jr. where the kids were. Jones Jr. said the kids were in South Carolina. Jones said, "I left the kids for a reason. I will never go back to them. Someone stick a needle in my arm and get me out of it. My mom gave it to me." Continue, Counselor.
Please do.
Jones Sr. asked why he didn't come see him this weekend along with the kids as he had planned to do. Jones Jr. stated, "I didn't come to see you because of all this stuff in my head." Once again, Jones Sr. asked where the kids are. Jones Jr. said, "When I tell you, I'm going to hang myself." Then Jones Jr. indicated an address of 2155B, South Carolina, and said that was where the kids are. He also indicated that if we loaded him in a car, he would take us to them. Jones Jr. continued by saying that he put the kids out of the vehicle on the road between his residence and the Walmart nearby in South Carolina. Jones Jr. said that one of his sons, Nahtahn, threatened to kill him by cutting him up and feeding him to the dogs. Jones Jr. said that this is not normal for a child to tell his parents that sort of thing. Jones Jr. continued to indicate that he had pushed the children out of the vehicle between his residence and Walmart in South Carolina. Continue, Counselor.
Please.
He even indicated he had kicked the kids out of the vehicle in that vicinity. Jones Jr. stated it was a 2-minute drive from his house on South Lake Drive in Lexington, South Carolina, and that police should look on the path. He also said he put all of them out at one time beside the road near Walmart. When asked about the muriatic acid discovered in his vehicle, Jones Jr. explained that was a technique used in his work when building and making computer boards. Jones said he wasn't worried about the kids because they want to kill him. Jones Jr. indicated he had encountered a police officer within the past few days. Jones Jr. continued by explaining he had been traveling smaller roads and avoiding the major highways and interstates. Jones Jr. said he had pulled over one evening, possibly in Alabama, to look at a road map as he began to pull off. His front tire on the passenger side fell into a deep hole or ditch, which caused him to be stuck. Someone that lived at a residence up the hill from where he had stopped came to his aid and stated they would call him a tow truck to pull him out. As he waited on the tow truck, a white male police officer wearing a dark blue uniform, driving a white marked SUV-type police vehicle, stopped to see if he needed any assistance. According to Jones Jr., the officer ran his driver's license and then left. Jones Jr. said he paid the tow truck operator $110 and departed the area. When asked where he would stop and sleep, Jones Jr. said hotels were too expensive and he would just stop at roadside parks and sleep in the vehicle.
I'm going to stop you right there for a second.
Yes, sir.
During the time of this interview, you had the Walmart receipt, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you confronted him with that?
We did.
And what on the receipt did you confront him with? And what was your response?
As I recall, the muriatic acid he stated was used for the computer boards, and whether that's true or not, I don't know. That was above my pay grade on that. And the other items, he just kind of nonchalantly discarded as unimportant or nothing like that.
Now, you also had knowledge of the clipboard that had the day 1, 2, 3 that you discussed earlier as well.
Yes, sir.
Did you confront Tim Jones with that information?
I don't recall if we brought that out during that interview or not. That might have been some holdback information that we didn't want him to know we had or knew about until we maybe had ascertained some more information. I don't know that we brought that out, Counselor.
Continuing on with your report, Mr. Jones Sr. asked his son a question. What did he ask him?
Timothy Jones Sr. asked his son, "Did you hurt the kids?" Jones Jr. blurted out, "Yes." And then he said, "No." This writer showed Jones Jr. copies of the handwritten notes previous. We did show him. We did, based on this, on my report. I showed him the day one plans and so forth of the head to campgrounds, and we've covered earlier. We did go over that. And Jones Jr. screamed, "Oh God, what did I do? I don't know what I might have done." Jones Jr. continued by saying the kids are fine and he never wanted to see them again. At one point during the interview, Jones Jr. held his arms up to his father's throat as to indicate a choking manner, but he did not attempt to put any pressure or harm his father. He had actually gotten up from the table from the previous sketch and walked around me, small room, and his father was seated on a couch right here, and he walked over to his father and leaned over and did like a choking manner to his father.
And I believe your notes reflected that was the end of the interview. Is that correct?
That's correct. Shortly after that, the interview ended.
Approximately what time was it did you note that the interview ended?
It would have been around 7:25 p.m. based on my notes.
So if I'm looking at State's Exhibit 135, the time that Miranda form was witnessed was, it says 18:08. That's 6:08 p.m.
Well, that would have been the time the waiver and everything was completed. There's about if you look at the time at the top, Counselor, it should be 18:06, 6:06 p.m. And by the time he had read the Miranda to me, he had Mirandized me, and when we went back over it, it was 6:08 p.m., so approximately 2 minutes on the Miranda form. But the length of time on the interview would have been from around 6 p.m. to 7:25. If that answers, I think I see where counsel was going. Yeah. About an hour and 20 minutes on the interview, the first interaction with Mr. Jones.
Now, your report notes, and you discussed some, but you documented some observations that you witnessed during the time of the interview. Would you share that with the jury, please?
I did. Profuse sweating, kind of foaming at the mouth, actually. I noticed that, yelling or screaming out, bursts of anger and fear of the children based on some of the statements he had made in the interview with him.
The next day, September 8th, Mr. Jones was interviewed again, correct?
He was interviewed again on the 8th, Counselor, yes.
Looking down on your report on page 5 in the middle, you were not actually present during the interview on the 8th, but you were present to observe Mr. Jones interact with his father after that interview. Is that correct?
Yes, as I recall, based on my notes, officials from Lexington County Sheriff's Department, SLED, and an FBI agent came over once after the interview the previous night. Naturally, we're on the phone with South Carolina saying, this is what we've got, this is what he said, this is how he's acting, what do you guys have over there? So we're working together. So they said, we're making plans to head that way. So they came over the next day. There was plenty of them for that interview, so I did not go into the interview room. I was in the adjacent room.
Specifically, after that interview was over, did you have a chance to overhear a conversation between Mr. Jones and the defendant?
I did.
What did you hear Mr. Jones say to his father?
Bear with me just a moment, Counselor. Okay, after this interview had concluded, Timothy Jones Jr. had admitted to harming the children. So we began to work a concerted effort. Okay, where are the children? He had agreed to take us back to where the children were. So I was in and out of that room along with other investigators. And we were trying to narrow down the stretch of highway where he believed it was, somewhere in Alabama. So I had maps, I had computer screens pulled up with maps. We're looking at this, we're looking at that. And while I was in the room, Timothy was allowed to speak with his father. And he requested to speak to his father, who was present at the Sheriff's Department. But his father was not in this interview with the subsequent interview, the second one we're talking about now. So we allowed him to speak to his father. Stated he was sorry for what he had done to the children, and there was no way his father could love him now. Jones Jr. indicated he strangled the children at his residence in South Carolina on or about the 28th of August, 2014. Jones Sr. maintained his composure and was able to communicate with his son. The two discussed a memorial service for the children and Jones Jr.'s financial situation, referring to the need to hire attorney for representation.
In relation to the way he acted on the 7th, when you interviewed him compared to the 8th, can you tell the jury about what, if any, differences you observed about his demeanor?
On the second interview, which was conducted by the South Carolina authorities and SLED, Sheriff Crumpton, I believe, was present in that interview. He was as different as night and day. His demeanor was down lower. He was calmer. He was more consistent in his answers. He was more consistent in his speech. He wasn't the same Timothy that I initially met the day before.
So when I asked that question, we're talking about two different times now that you've interacted with him, correct?
That's correct, Counselor.
First would have been the interview on the 7th when you interviewed him, which would have been about 6 p.m. on September 7th.
Yes,
The
sir.
first time you encountered him.
That's correct, sir.
The second one that we're talking about was after another interview that the FBI and the Lexington County Sheriff's Department had with him on the following day. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then your interaction with Mr. Jones would have been after that interview was over.
That's correct.
You also had contact again with the defendant the following day. We're now on Tuesday, September 9th. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And again, did you have an opportunity to Mirandize Mr. Jones?
I did, Counselor.
And let me show you a document and ask if you recognize it.
This is another Miranda form that is dated the 9th of September 2014, and the time is indicated here. This appears to be the original form, and I advised him of his constitutional rights, same as the form we previously went over. And it was signed, read by me and witnessed by Special Agent Dave Mackey with the FBI.
This form is the same as the form that's on the screen, is that correct?
It is identical, same form, just different date, time, and witness.
John, the state would offer the Miranda form from September 9th of 2014.
So previous objection.
Lieutenant Johnson, did you again on September 9th advise Mr. Jones of his rights?
Yes, sir, I did.
In the same manner, did he seem to understand him this time as well?
He did, sir.
What time was it that the rights were administered?
If I may expound just a moment. Regarding this date, this was the date that we were preparing to go to Alabama and search for the children. And we advised him of his rights, simply because of anything that's said could be used in court. The exact same form. This time was at 11:13 a.m. in the morning. Witnessed and signed at 11:14. Same form, different date.
Did he understand the rights?
He did.
That morning?
Yes, sir.
Did you or anybody else threaten him to get him to either speak with you or to take you to the children?
We did not.
Did you or anybody else make any promises to him to get him to speak with you or take you law enforcement to the children?
We did not.
Did he appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs on that day?
No, he did not.
Comparing his demeanor the morning of the 9th to the time you saw him on the 8th to the erratic behavior, for a better word, that you talked about on the 7th, would you describe what you saw on the 9th?
Two different people. Again, he was the next 2 days of interaction was as different from the first as the night and day. He was much more calmer, speaking calmly, answering questions, assisting.
After the advisement of the Miranda rights, were you and other law enforcement agencies involved in attempting to locate the children?
Yes, multiple agencies were involved in this endeavor.
And do you remember who you rode with?
One of my other agents out of my office, Trent Weeks, and I were the two representatives from MBI.
And Mr. Jones would have been transported by somebody else.
Mr. Jones was transported because he was in the custody of the Smith County, Mississippi Sheriff. He was transported in a deputy's car along with a Lexington County investigator, Adam Creech, and another investigator from the Smith County Sheriff's Department, as I recall. It was basically a caravan leaving the Smith County, Mississippi area, traveling back to Alabama. During this time of looking at maps and narrowing down and looking at receipts and trying to get a timeline of where he had been, I had contacted the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, spoke with agents there, along with some sheriffs in some of the lower lying counties along the route that we believed at that time that he had probably taken. So it was multiple agency assistance.
What time did you and the other officers leave the sheriff's department?
About 12:30 on the date in question, the 9th. We left, 12:27 actually, based on my notes. We left the Smith County Sheriff's Department en route to Alabama area, Alabama Highway 10.
Did you have, how long of a drive was it from Smith County Sheriff's Department
To-
where the children were ultimately found?
It was, I would say it was about 3 hours. It was about 3 hours. It's 160 or 70 miles from Smith County. It was deeper into Alabama than we anticipated at first.
Did Did you know exactly where you were going that day?
No, sir, we did not. As I stated previously, we had an idea based on the timeline that we had, the rough timeline that we had established, and communicating with Jones Jr., Timothy, and looking at maps and talking to authorities over there. You know, we didn't realize how far it was.
As far as the drive there, do you remember how many, for lack of a better word, wrong turns you took that you had to take and then undo?
We only took one misguided turn, and it wasn't really a turn.
What was it?
According to Timothy, he had given us information that he had discarded the children in black garbage bags at an old dirt road. Well, I'm not real familiar with South Carolina, but in old Mississippi and Alabama and down through that area, you have a lot of rural areas and timberland and have a lot of logging. And on these logging sites, you have loading zones. They'll go up there and they'll clear a big area, and that's where the skidders will drag the logs out to. And we were traveling on 10, and like I said, we were in several vehicles, so we're communicating via cell phone and watching mirrors, and I think Trent, my agent, and I were out front. We saw them stop, slow down, and pull in one area, just off the main highway, up a hill, red dirt area, old logging loading site. Wasn't just a moment, they said, Timothy, I may have said that wrong. Timothy said, this is not the place. Pull back out, and we continued east on Alabama 10 for several more miles. And the next spot, like I stated, the old loading zone, the log landing zone where they pulled them to, that was the spot. Second spot we stopped at was it.
Would you describe the area of the land that you had before finding?
Yes, sir. Along Route 10 in Alabama, it's a hunter's paradise. It's a wooded area, rural Alabama, a lot of timberland. And as we were traveling on Highway 10, we turned left back north, if I was looking at a map, and just went up just a few yards, just maybe 50, 100 yards from where the log trucks would enter out onto the highway. You know, where it always gets so muddy and dirty when they say trucks entering highway area. We pulled right up in there into the big loading zone, and that's where it was at. It was up a slight hill, red dirt area, clear-cut area, and then, you know, they'll have different routes where the skidders have pulled timber up to the loading zone and where they've de-limbed them and things of that nature. And off one of the skidder runs was where the garbage bags were. The children. Yes, sir.
Sean,
After the children were found, would you describe what your role was and what you did?
Once we had located the children, it wasn't but just the cavalry came in at that point. Alabama Bureau of Investigation, I can't say enough about how good they did, and the local sheriffs down in those counties, those two counties that we had kind of narrowed things down to, were just tremendous help. But when we radioed or phone called and said, look, we're at this location, here's our GPS, I mean, the cavalry come rolling in. Alabama secured the area. They had 3 choppers in the air and a bunch of Alabama Bureau of Investigation, state and narcotics agents. And basically that area was quarantined off, taped off, as I recall. And Mr. Jones, Timothy Jones Jr., wasn't kept there, but maybe a period of 10 minutes or less. And then Sheriff Crumpton, since he was in the custody of Smith County Sheriff and Sheriff Crumpton was responsible for him, he told his deputies, go back to Mississippi with him. Get him out of this area right here, right now, and all these people. Wasn't no need in leaving him there.
At some point, did members from the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division come to that scene?
They did, and Agent Weeks and I think we remained on scene until South Carolina may have gotten there. We stayed there quite a few hours that evening.
Lieutenant, thank you. Please answer any questions the defense has for you.
Yes, sir.
Afternoon, Lieutenant Johnson.
Good afternoon, sir.
We've met before.
We have, sir.
I came to Mississippi. We met at the Smith County Sheriff's Department.
We did, sir, yes.
And then you came here and testified in March of this year. We talked then.
We did, Counselor, yes, sir.
And we've talked a couple times while you've been here, right?
Yes, sir, we have.
Okay. You began your testimony with Mr. Graham by saying that you had great concerns when you got to Mississippi or got to Smith County, and you didn't know if the kids were alive or dead. That's your testimony?
Yes, sir.
So if you had great concerns about knowing their condition, then you immediately called Mr. Tim Jones Sr., sitting right back here, and asked him to come help. Is that what happened?
You know, and respectfully, and Counselor's right, I don't recall who called who or at what point, but at some point, I did communicate with Tim Jones Sr. And it would have probably been that very day before we did the interview with Tim Jr. Yes. So at some point, we did call
him on the 6th when you got called from.
Was that the original stop?
That's correct.
No, sir, I did not. You're right, Counsel.
When you got notified that night, you didn't call him then?
No, I didn't even know his name at that point.
Right. And you didn't call him when you arrived at Smith County, and when you got the phone call, like, you need to come see this car, you didn't call him then?
No, sir.
You went and saw the car, right?
I did.
You took notes and had a notepad with you during your investigation.
Yes, I did.
And you took notes during your interview of Timothy Jones, Jr.
Yes,
And you used those notes to prepare your report.
that's correct.
And then you shredded those notes.
That's correct.
But while you were looking around, after we came, you found some old notes that you still had, right?
That's correct. Found some other handwritten notes.
And you turned those over.
Absolutely.
I'm going to show you a page and ask you if those are your notes.
These are, Counselor. Yes, sir.
Okay, and does it indicate on here a time where you called Tim Jones Sr.?
It does. That's correct.
Okay, so that was you that called him.
That's based on my notes. That is correct. It says here at 13:15 hours or at 1:15 in the afternoon that I had spoke. It says spoke with Jones Sr. at 1:15 hours. They are coming to Raleigh. Didn't say I called him, but I did speak to him. I don't remember how that happened. It may have been me that called him.
Okay, so you're saying, well, when you spoke to him, it wasn't by a radio.
No, sir. It would have been cell phone,
It was on a phone.
telephone. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You just don't know if you originated the call. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. That's correct. But I did speak to him based on my notations.
But that's when you asked him to come help.
Don't know if I asked him or he said, I'm coming anyway, but they were on the way and we welcomed them coming.
Okay, and that was after you had seen the car.
That's correct.
That was after you had smelled the car.
That's correct.
That was after you had seen the receipts.
That's correct.
You knew that the meals purchased were for one person.
And that's correct. It appeared that way.
You knew that there wasn't any luggage in the car.
There was a lot of stuff in the car, but I didn't see any suitcases like, let's go on vacation. No.
Right. You knew that there weren't toothbrushes in the car.
I didn't have a list of what all was in the car, but there was a lot of stuff in the car. If this answers counsel's question, there was no suitcases as if you're going on a trip. There was miscellaneous clothing. There was so much stuff in there. There could have been a toothbrush in there is what I'm saying. I didn't itemize it.
You knew there weren't any car seats in the car.
That's correct. There were no car seats in the car.
You knew that the car smelled like death.
I knew it had a very foul odor. Yes. I would associate it with decomposition.
All right. Now, when Mr. Tim Jones Sr. got there, you met with him,
And his wife, yes, sir.
and you see them here today.
I do.
Can you point them out for the jury?
I can. Mr. Jones Sr. is in a gray shirt about 3 rows back, hand up, and then his wife, Julie, right there.
You didn't tell him about what you had found in the car.
No,
You didn't tell him that there was a piece of scalped hair.
no.
You wanted him to help you try and find his grandchildren.
He was a concerned grandfather, and yes, anything that would make Timothy Stent Jr. feel more comfortable, that would help us maybe find a location of where the children were. And sincerely, it was a well-being concern. We didn't have a body to say we've got a death or multiple deaths. We had a father with no children. Where are the kids?
Moving forward to when you and Tim Sr. went to speak with Timothy Jr., okay? That was on the 7th,
Yes, the first interview with him?
Right.
Yes, sir.
and that was in the evening about 6 o'clock, right?
Correct.
And you knew that Timothy Jones Jr. had been in custody at the Smith County Detention Center for about 24 hours at that point in time.
About, I think the stop, based on the information that I ascertained, was around 8 o'clock. So yeah, at least 22 hours, counselor.
And you knew that he had been transported to meet with medical professionals to draw blood, hair, and DNA earlier that day.
I don't know that I knew that at that time. It's possible, but I was working on other things, and that wasn't my lane at that time.
You knew that he wasn't upstairs in the jail, sweating profusely, screaming, crying, carrying on.
I can't answer that. He wasn't in my presence. Yes, sir.
So when you got in there to speak with Mr. Jones, and I know you've read your entire interaction from your report. It took you about 5 minutes to read that.
A good, yes. Yes.
And that was an hour and a half worth of conversation that you summarized in your report.
Yes, sir.
So it wasn't like Tim said, Cindy put this poison on me, put it in my head. That wasn't how it was it?
Oh, no, sir.
It was, Cindy put it on me. Cindy, the voice in my head, I can't get rid of them. You got to put a bullet in me to get it out.
I would agree with the way counsel presented that. Very loud, very yelling, very outspoken.
And he went from that to crying.
That's correct.
And he would spend time crying.
Yeah, he would get emotional. Yes, he would get emotional. He would cry. He would have outbursts. Yes.
He said, when Amber left me, it just came out. I couldn't control it. The voices are in my head.
That's correct.
And you didn't ask him, like, tell me more about the voices.
Well, at that time, he would change gears, change subjects, things of that nature. And I didn't tape record it, so I don't know verbatim. But my notations and what I read to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury is my recollection based on my notes that I took of how he acted. But I couldn't tell you word for word what he said.
Well, that wasn't what you were focused on, was it? You weren't worried about the voices.
Our focus was, where are the children? Are they okay?
Right. That's what you wanted.
Yes, sir.
Like, where are the children?
Yes,
He
sir.
said, I'll take you to them.
He did say that.
And then later on, he went on to say that they were in South Carolina.
That's correct.
And you knew that that wasn't true.
Yes.
Um,
Well, let me rephrase. We didn't think they were in South Carolina.
well, you had talked to South Carolina, right?
Right.
You knew that the Walmart was 5 minutes from his house.
I can tell you where they weren't. They weren't at home. They weren't with the mother. They weren't somewhere between the residence and Walmart. Outside of that, I don't know where they were.
Right. You knew.
Yes, sir.
So you knew that that wasn't true.
I knew that wasn't true. Yes.
When you got towards the end of your interview, you asked him, and I know you said this, but you asked him if he was sleeping in hotels or where he was stopping,
Where he would stop and sleep.
and he told you that he was sleeping in the car, right?
He did. That's what he said.
He was sleeping in the car with the bodies of his children, right?
He didn't say that, but I see what you're saying. You're saying that bodies were obviously in the vehicle. Is that what you're saying, counsel?
It is.
Yes, obviously so. At some points he was.
He was sleeping in the car with the children for about 9 days.
Yes, it appears so based on the timeline.
And then based on the receipts that you had, he was traveling all over the Southeast.
That's correct.
You described this behavior as something you've never seen before.
One other time, one other case, similar, but this was extreme behavior that Mr. Jones Jr. was exhibiting.
Right, and I think that was your previous testimony. This was really extreme.
It was extreme behavior, yes, sir.
And you've seen people drunk and high before.
I have, counselor.
You've seen people who were brain damaged before.
I've seen people injured, yes.
You've seen people who are mentally ill before, talk to them.
I have.
You've seen people who are brain damaged, mentally ill, and on drugs.
At points in my career, I'm sure I've run across all of that.
And you don't know if this behavior was one or some combination of all those things.
No, I did not know what it was.
You mentioned that moving forward to the next day, which was the 8th, right?
Yes, sir. May I digress just a moment, counselor? On the on the question you previously asked, I didn't think it was alcohol, and it was more similar, his behavior was more similar to some sort of substance abuse, to me, based on my experience and training, what I had seen. To be clear on what I thought.
Sure.
Okay.
Voices in my head. She put voices in my head. The voices in my head came out. That sounds like that's just you. That's just drugs.
Well, I've seen people hallucinate and say things of that nature.
It's psychotic, right?
It would be something along those
It's a
lines.
break from reality.
It sounded like it.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Moving forward to the next day, after agents from the FBI and Lexington had interviewed Timothy Jones Jr., that's when you were talking about his conversation with his father, right?
Yes, sir.
And he apologized to his dad, and he said, "You'll never be able to love him after what I've done."
He did.
Dad said, "No, that's not true. We're going to help you. We're going to get you the mental health you need."
That's exactly what was said, sir. That I heard, yes.
And you mentioned that his dad talked about hiring Tim a lawyer, right?
He talked about arrangements for the children and legal counsel. Yes, that's correct.
And you know that I'm a public defender.
I do now. I wasn't sure, but I do now.
You know Mr. Matson's a public defender.
Objection,
Same.
I knew someone on that table was, but I wasn't sure who.
Do you know that they didn't hire lawyers?
objection, Your Honor.
I don't know, counselor, respectfully.
No.
No. Sustain it.
On the next day is when you went with law enforcement officials with Timothy Jones Jr. to locate the children's bodies that we're talking about.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And when you got there and Timothy Jones Jr. got out of the car and he showed you where the bags were, right?
He did.
And you saw them.
I did.
And there was some animal activity in them. You could see bones sticking out of the bag.
That's right.
And Timothy Jones Jr. was screaming and crying. Is that right?
I can tell you exactly what he said.
Well, you can tell me in your report you wrote he appeared visibly upset, screaming and crying.
That's correct. And what he said.
What?
He was cuffed in the front. He had an orange jumpsuit on as per incarceration. He got out of the car. You could smell the odor of what would be related to decomposition. He was crying, and he yelled, "They're over there," and he pointed like that. with his hands. I walked over the knoll several yards, 60, 70 yards, and observed the bags on the side. That's what he said.
Okay, that was what he screamed? Because you wrote he was screaming and crying out.
He screamed it, said it very loudly, yes. Yes, sir, he did.
He was visibly upset.
He appeared to be.
But ultimately, he did the right thing, right?
If you're
By
referring,
Action, Your Honor.
taking you to the bodies.
That's an improper question. Talking about what's.
Let's say, rephrase it. Eventually took you to the bodies.
He cooperated, he eventually cooperated.
he did, sir. Yes, sir, he did.
He told everybody what happened,
He did.
and he took you to where the children's remains were.
He did also do that, yes.
Thank you, of course. When you went to interview Tim Jones on the 7th, back when your initial interview, right?
Yes, sir.
You went through, sorry, just wanted to make sure we're on the same.
I know it does get confusing on
It
the
does.
dates. It's been so long ago, but yes, that was the first encounter that I had with him, Counselor. Is that the day you're referring to?
I am.
Yes,
And you
sir.
had been meeting with Smith County law enforcement for most of that day.
In and out, yes, sir. That's correct.
Right, you were drafting warrants for electronics, you had talked to the undersheriff, you were in communication with people from South Carolina.
The FBI
Right.
included, yes.
And you talked about when you went through the Miranda right form, right?
Yes, sir.
How it was important to know that even if he wanted a lawyer, he could stop talking at any point in time and request a lawyer, right?
Yes.
And nobody from Smith County had ever told you that on the previous day he had said he wanted a lawyer, that he was taking the fifth.
I didn't even know.
Yeah. I need to put some on the record, so I'm gonna send y'all the jury record, and you're right back in here. Purposely recommend objection sustained. Ask your next question.
Lieutenant Johnson, you were not aware that Mr. Jones had invoked earlier that day when asked to provide hair, DNA, and blood samples.
I was not privy to that interaction or conversation with Mr. Jones at that point. I hadn't even met him at that point.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Check.
Yeah.
Let me. Lieutenant Johnson, have you ever been involved with attempting to secure consent from somebody to obtain blood, hair, or DNA?
I have many times.
And during that process, you just ask them if they'll do it, correct?
Yeah.
On overruled.
Yes, sir. And I refer back to, I'll give you a quick example, Counselor. I refer back to when I worked the road as a trooper. You might get someone that was injured in an automobile accident, and they may not be able to give you a breath sample, or someone refused to give a breath sample but would give you a consent for blood in the forms, in the boxes that are used in Mississippi. It has a consent form in there where you explain it to them. They have a right to refuse it, fill out the information, they sign it, they can give you consent, you can take them to the hospital and have a nurse or doctor draw it.
So they can either agree to cooperate or not.
Yes, they have the right to refuse.
Thank you.
All right. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Safe travels.
Thank you, Judge.
Want to stop there?
It's up to you here to call you. I can tell you right now.
Who you got next?
Sheriff. It's up to you. I don't know how.
You want one more witness, or you want to adjourn for the day? Adjourn for the day. Fair enough. Have a good evening. Enjoy your supper. Tomorrow we hopefully will be more productive. My hope, but sometimes because of the vast physical evidence, it just took more time to organize it. Don't discuss the case. Don't do any independent research. Now, did any of y'all, anybody try to contact any of y'all about anything going on in the case? Anybody? Okay. They have, if anybody approach you, ask you.